all know them. The people who were screaming about, we live in a time of participation trophies, and there's all this unearned self-esteem, and that people are just too well. They think they know too much. It's all across the country. I mean, it's really insane as you're watching this illegitimate spawn of the Tea Party. These angry Karens, these zombie Karens running to the school boards, complaining about the fact that their little precious has to wear a mask. And I've had enough of it. There's a moment where, and I've believed that we've done the participation trophy stuff and the unearned self-esteem for too long. And the people who complain about it the most seem to be the ones who are the ones who got the participation trophies and the unearned self-esteem. These are people who barely got out of high school biology telling us about vaccines that they know nothing about. And yet what's interesting is all of them have been vaccinated. Not against COVID, but about everything else beforehand. So they've been vaccinated, they lived through it, and now they're claiming that some bizarre cute stuff, I don't know, Bill Gates, zombie virus, I don't know. I've stopped keeping up with the crazy. But here's what I know. 40% of all new hospitalizations due to COVID are happening in Florida and Texas. Mississippi today announced that they're going to be out of hospital beds soon. That they are actually setting up hospitals, field hospitals, inside of parking garages in August in freaking Mississippi. Now, let this sink in for a second. You're going to take these parking garages, you can turn them into little hospitals, little triage centers, little field hospitals. I'm sure you're going to be able to try and blow some kind of air, some kind of cooling system, kind of something, into places where people are going to be on ventilators. And why not? Because it doesn't really matter what the air quality is, because they're going to be on ventilators. All something that we could have avoided. Florida, as I said yesterday, they've purchased some new mobile morgues because they're expecting more death. Oklahoma, they have now sounded the alarm. They're running out of hospital beds. Now, remember at the very beginning to all of this? Remember at the very beginning when what they were saying is we have to control the number of people who are coming to the hospital. We can't have our system overrun because, while we're losing the people on the on the COVID side, all of the other people, we're going to be losing them too. People who are suffering from heart attacks, people, cancer, go down the line. We're not going to be able to meet the needs. We don't have the infrastructure for it. We don't have the ability to keep up. Well, this is where we're heading. And now we're heading into school. Heading into the school season. Florida's been back to school 2 days. 2. Already one of the school districts, in Palm Beach County, they're asking 440 students to stay home to quarantine. 2 days in, 440. They've already got 51 students and faculty with confirmed cases. Already 2 days in. And here's the thing. This is the ones they know about. It's crazy. And what you've got is just this really bizarre moment where there are so many people who think they know so much. Well, not. And we're all going to suffer for this. And look, I've taken the position that I don't care. If they get it and they die, not a tear. Good, bye. The problem still is the healthcare system for the rest of us. And the fact that once this virus jumps the vaccine, we got to go back through this whole exercise again. Or what ends up happening is we just make it the new crazy normal. Where you go, you know what? Bunch of people got sick, bunch of people died. That's how it is. That's normal now. And remember, these are the people who were afraid that some world government was going to come and extinguish people. You would think, if there was a way to protect yourself, you'd try and figure it out. And I know I've gotten emails from people going, Rick, calling them stupid isn't helpful. I know. But what else do you do? How else do you bring people around to the idea that they should protect themselves? And by them not protecting themselves, they're actually making all of us less safe. And I know people have different beliefs. I hear this nonsense all the time. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we've allowed too many people too much access to spread lies and misinformation. And look, I'm somebody who believes in more speech as opposed to less. But I think on some level you have to be held accountable for the words that you say. Much like you can't yell fire in a theater without being held accountable, I don't think you should be allowed to knowingly spread misinformation. Like drink this silver stuff. This will protect you from everything. Today, the 4th anniversary of the murder of Heather Heyer. 4 years ago today, beautiful 32-year-old woman, mowed down. Her death shocked the world because it showed the face of hatred, the white supremacist movement in this country. She was killed by a 20-year-old Ohio Nazi. Now he's going to spend probably the rest of his life in jail. And good. I was thinking about this today. In a number of states across the country, you've got the Republicans who have pushed through these anti-protester vehicle laws, where in some states you can now run people over if they're protesting in front of you because, hey, you got to get to the Starbucks, or hey, you got to get to the donut shop. They might close. There are laws now that say you can run people over. I got to wonder, would this 20-year-old Nazi have been held accountable with those laws on the books? Is this the future? And 4 years ago today when this beautiful young woman was killed, we heard the fine people on both sides. Fine people on both sides. That was kind of the punchline to the whole thing. And the one thing that the Unite the Right rally did then is it united people across this country. To kill. Whether it was Heather Heyer, whether it was Brian Sicknick on January 6th, or whether it's the more than 600,000 people who have lost their lives to COVID, because we've got people who, we just can't, follow simple directions. And the thing that's crazy to me is when you look at what's come out of the former guy's movement of hatred, it's still there. Like there are people who firmly believe, and I have somebody who believes tomorrow Donald Trump's going to be reinstated. Told me flat out, tomorrow it's going to happen. You just watch. There are other people saying, no, we've moved that date. And it's all on the guise of violence and hatred. And it comes back to 4 years ago today, that Unite the Right rally, riot, whatever you want to call it. And then all of the other shows of force that they did throughout the Trump years, whether it was invading a state capitol over mask mandates, or it was in February of 2020 that whatever rally lobby day they claimed, where you had all these armed people showing up in their dress gear that I said was a show of force. They were showing us what they're capable of. That was a mobilization to show power. And the world wasn't shocked enough, because here's where my fear is. My fear is we've forgotten all of this, because you got Donald Trump coming out right now saying that they know who the person who shot Ashley Babbitt is. They're trying to make that treasonous woman a martyr. They know who he is, and they're going to spin it. They are going to spin this, and it is going to be dangerous, and I'm not sure where it takes us. Because the more I'm hearing from contacts inside of this, the person who shot Ashley Babbitt was an African-American police officer. This is going to be, and Trump knows this, which is why they're playing coy with it, which is why they're playing with it, which is why they're saying that she was murdered and they know who he is, which is why they're threatening. Because this is what the right does. They need to ramp up maximum fear. Maximum fear of violence, maximum fear of the unknown, maximum fear of the other, maximum fear of, Bill Gaetz. He's got a chip in there. And, I heard a comedian the other day go, why would Bill Gaetz want to chip you to find out anything about you? Bill Gaetz doesn't care about you because clearly you don't care about yourself. So I'm looking at this moment and I'm going, we're heading down the wrong paths. And the next couple of months, do we have to do this again? And the answer is yes. We're going to have to live through another massive crisis. And the question is where does this bring us? Is this a moment where government is going to have to step forward and start mandating this stuff before you can go into certain places? I don't know. I'm generally not someone who's in favor of those kind of mandates. But wow, when common sense is right in front of you, and you still choose, when you still make the choice to make the wrong one. I used to say, and this is where my mind's always been, I used to say, you have the right to make the wrong choice because that's your problem. This now affects me and everybody that I love, and the country that I love. You got to do the right thing, man. Anyway, got lots to get to today. Infrastructure, some labor stuff that's just driving me crazy. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1955. That was the day Teamsters organizer, 28-year-old William Grammy, was kidnapped and beaten. Grammy had arrived in Sebastopol, California to help organize about 350 workers in local canneries, drying plants, and fruit sheds. The Teamsters had been on campaign footing for months in an attempt to win union recognition, higher wages, better working conditions, and benefits. They had lost a union representation election the previous fall after Sebastopol apple growers moved quickly to lay off union supporters. By January, cannery workers at Oscar Hall & Sons voted for union representation. The workers at Barlow Company would vote against the union just 2 months later. But by early August, the strike wave hit. Workers walked off the job at the Sebastopol Cooperative Cannery. More at 7 other area canneries joined them on strike, in the days that followed. Grammy would later testify that he had heard reports weeks earlier of a grower threatening to have him killed within 3 hours should any strike actually take place. During the strike that would ultimately prove victorious, 3 men kidnapped Grammy outside the union's hall. He was driven along a rural road, tied to a pole, gagged, and beaten with a bicycle chain. Left for dead, he was found the next day and hospitalized immediately. But the union and the strikers remained undeterred. Before the strike was over, scab trucks attempting to haul apples to market were vandalized and burned, and scab drivers were beaten. 8 months later, the apple industry finally came to the negotiating table. By May of 1956, apple growers signed with the Teamsters. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as I said yesterday, looking forward to moving these infrastructure bills forward for a bunch of reasons. Transportation, moving to electric vehicles, remaking our economy, leaving something for our children in the future. So many opportunities to do good things. Maybe a little renewable energy, maybe move us in that direction. Because after all, the UN did say, that recent report, it's code red for humanity. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there are 107 wildfires going on in this country right now. Texas, California, Montana are literally burning, which is why we need to do something. We need to do it now. And here to share some thoughts on the infrastructure bills, I've asked Austin Keyser to come talk with us. Austin is the assistant to the International President of Government Affairs at the National Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW. Austin, thanks for taking time for us.
I appreciate it, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into all the wires and all the transportation stuff and all the infrastructure stuff, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about the passing of Rich Trumka today. His service was today. I know you worked for him. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, Rich Trumka was a great leader at Titan. I grew up in coal country myself, and I grew up as a kid watching him on television, locking arms, wearing camouflage, being militant, out fighting for workers' rights. It gave me a lot of passion for the labor movement as a small child. You got 3 channels growing up out there, and he seemed to be on the news every night out there fighting for workers. So always been a hero of mine. And, as you just mentioned, I got the opportunity to work for him. I was Central Labor Council leader in Southern Ohio, and he tapped me to come in and be the state director for the National AFL-CIO in Ohio, then the Midwest region director. And it was during the fights right after the Tea Party, sort of took over the Midwest, and just so many hours. I can't even count how many hours we spent in cars riding around the Midwest, going from fight to fight, from Wisconsin to Indiana, Ohio, Senate Bill 5. Just a great trooper, and somebody I've stayed close to even since I came back to the IBW. He's just a great mentor, and he loved to see young people coming up in the labor movement. He loved to coach us along, and just gave me and a lot of other people a lot of great opportunities and a lot of education. So somebody will always be dear to my heart, and somebody I'll do my best to carry on his legacy.
No, I mean, from this point forward now, it's we're going to have to pick up that vision and move forward. And we're in this most interesting time because I would argue Joe Biden's probably the most pro-labor president, at least of my lifetime. And there's something of an opportunity to get some stuff done, maybe in this big infrastructure bill, but hopefully down the road as well. So now's the time where labor's got to come back together and unite and pick up Rich's mantle and move on.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We something he was very passionate about was energy. Obviously, he came out of the coal miners, so. But he was like us. He realized that things are changing, that climate change is real. The real things went out there. Our members are the first ones to go into storms. We're on the tip of watching climate change. These superstorms, these major events, they cause power outages and major devastation. And our power linemen are the first to go in before most other first responders to make sure the area is safe and electrified. Hospitals have their electricity back, and so it's definitely not something we're hiding from. It's been difficult. To look at how you transition, and that's been been a tough bridge for us. We don't want to leave workers behind in the process, and I think we've made a lot of progress. And in this bill, we certainly made a lot of progress because President Biden is such a pro-union
Yeah, I mean,
president.
the fact that he got this through, and I've been saying for a while, we've been talking about infrastructure for a very long time in this country. And I've been pointing out the fact that the I-35 bridge collapse was 14 years ago this month. And we were talking about it for probably several years before that, how we needed a big investment in our future. So as someone in the building trades, you've got to be looking at both plans, especially the hard infrastructure plan, as an opportunity to get people back to work, to create good family sustaining jobs, and to rebuild the future of this country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much in this infrastructure package, and you know, I want to hedge it with this. I mean, it's not sort of a perfect sort of, you know, what we would have exactly written, but we have to negotiate with Republicans here, and that's a tough thing to do. And I got to say that the end product is impressive. I was quite honestly surprised at how far the White House and the Senate Democrats were able to get us with Republicans on this. I mean, we're talking $73 billion for power infrastructure. There's tons of funding in here for renewables, for electric vehicles, for carbon capture, for keeping nuclear power plants online, which is so important to the baseload power. We can't decarbonize without that. That same report you just mentioned, you know, says that very directly. It's got to be a key component, and we represent workers at I think 89 of the 93 reactors in this country. So, you know, a big issue for us, a big issue for our members. So, you know, look, there's weatherization assistance in here. There's public transit. There's airports. You know, you've seen the bill. There's just so much in here that's good, and we're talking record-breaking investment levels. But you know, it left a little on the table, and we're going to try to figure that out later. For instance, we didn't get prevailing wages on the broadband infrastructure. You know, that's a giant investment, and you know, it's $42 billion, and that's substantial. But what we do know is there are going to be processes. There's going to be where these money's allocated. There's going to be administrative functions here, rulemaking that the administration is going to be very friendly on. So I think we're going to be able to clean a lot of that up through the administration and through the White House as it's deployed.
No, on the broadband front, it's one of those things that I'm fairly upset about, because we're basically handing corporate America a boatload of money and saying, here, go ahead, here's a gift, as where they should have been making these investments. I'm a believer, and we should be reclaiming our electrical lines, our utilities, our broadband. We should have communities who are able to do this, and we own and control our own destiny on that front.
Yeah, I mean, so you have the Tennessee Valley Authority, you know, as an example here, and quite honestly, they've built more fiber optic middle mile broadband than anybody else in the country currently. So it's a dual functionality. So broadband, you know, we hear a lot of it talked about in the context of schools and education and the digital divide, and those things are all very important. Again, a kid coming up in Appalachia, I see what, you know, my home community is pretty underserved. But the beauty of it is that these utilities need broadband too. They need fiber optics between their substations. They need it into the meters of homes. If we're going to have a smart grid, it has to be networked, and it has to have a communication system attached to it. So there's so many opportunities here of dual purpose that, yeah, I mean, I think building this thing through utilities is going to make sure it's union. So it's going to take a lot, you know, it's going to, and rural co-ops are playing a big part. Middle Tennessee Electric, for instance, in Tennessee is probably the biggest builder and service provider now in the entire region, and maybe in the country, for a rural co-op, and they're doing this work union, and it's a great example. So there's new business models that are going to pop up here. We're going to play a little bit of whack-a-mole here, making sure the bad guys don't prevail on us. But I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think having the White House, friends in the White House, it's going to help a lot.
So the other question I have is, I mean, there's so much to do. I mean, you know, I remember Jerry Brown ran for president in '92 on the platform of he was going to restring all of the wires in the entire country that go into people's homes, because there's some astronomical amount of loss just in transmission for electricity. We've been talking about doing this for ages. Now there's almost an opportunity to do some of it. The question is, do we have enough people who are able to do it? Look, I'm trying to find somebody to just wire a couple of outlets. I don't know how you're going to rewire half the country and do the kind of work that we're talking about going forward with solar and electric vehicles. I mean, there are going to be wires coming out of our ears. Do we have enough people to play with those wires?
Well, of course, it takes a while to train a journey level electrician, and power linemen are about a 4-year training program. And we've been screaming this for years. We need, just like any other business or any other industry, anything else, we need market predictability if we're going to invest. We do our workforce training is completely industry funded. We don't ask for federal dollars or handouts here. We're not a startup. We've been around since the advent of electricity, training electricians. And our programs are plenty, they're like a bladder. We can take in as many workers as we need. They're built, the structure is built to take in workers, but you're exactly right. Recruitment is hard. And so we're excited about a lot of new initiatives that we're working on. One of them is working with the military. We've been partnering with the White House with the, something Rich was a big champion of, which is, the Veterans Council, Will Attic. I don't know if you know Will Attic.
Sure,
but,
good friend of the show.
He's doing great. Yeah, he's doing great work. We've been partnering up and having a lot of conversations on how we get more folks coming from the military, because one, they're ready to go to work, right? They love the community of being in a union after they get out of the military. It's a natural fit for them, and it does away with a lot of social ills that come with that transition for them. So great opportunities, and it's the most diverse workforce in the country. So it's an automatic sort of plus up for us in that department too, which we've made huge strides on. But it's going to be it's hard. The people, a lot of high schools and universities have not been friendly to blue collar jobs. They've coached people away from them, and we're starting to get some momentum back. And these power liners are making 6 figures.
No, I know. Just to get somebody to come wire an outlet, it ain't cheap.
We're going to need 100,000 more of them, we think, over the next few years. But huge opportunities on the grid too in the manufacturing space with the Buy America provisions that are in this bill. We're talking something IBW does and other unions do is manufacture wire and transformers and all of these components that are going to go into the grid. It's not just wires, and it's not just sort of the installation.
No, I mean, the jobs that will come from the reverberation effect of just doing some of this stuff is mind blowing. And it's one of those things where I can't believe that administrations of the past, the former administration, on day one when he took over, I'm saying you should pass a massive infrastructure bill because everybody's for it. And we're now finding out everybody's kind of for it. The polling is in a time when we're so divided on virtually every issue. This one seems to be, not so divided.
Yeah. Well, I wonder about the last administration's strategy there, because they had a huge opportunity to build a very, as populist as he tried to be. It was insane to me that he didn't do infrastructure, because Democrats were sitting there ready to do infrastructure. It would have been a tough negotiation for them too, but it was a tough negotiation, just like it was for Biden. But we were able to get it done and able to get big things done here. So yeah, it's insane to me that they didn't get anything done there, and but a bunch of rhetoric and a bunch of talk and a bunch of banter, but no delivery. So here we are. We're sitting here with on the verge of, anyways. We're one step of like a quarter of the way there, getting this to the president's desk.
Yeah.
If we're going to measure it, but I think we're well on our way. As
someone who focuses on this like you do, obviously you're the assistant to the international president for government affairs there at the IBEW. What do you see? If you're the odds broker on this, if you're the odds maker, what do you think the odds of getting one of them or both of them through? Where would you be laying money down?
If I was going to lay money down, I'd say we're going to get both of them done, and I think we're going to get both of them done later this fall, and it's going to be. I would give it a 90% chance here. I think this was the biggest hurdle of the process, was getting, the split Senate, to get those 10 Republican senators on board. From here on out, we just need simple majorities. And, the House, of course, is they're posturing, and rightfully so. They want good democratic principles and priorities incorporated into the reconciliation package, into the budget package. And, Republicans knew that, and still 19 of them voted for this bill. They knew that right behind this was going to come a purely Democratic bill that was going to have some Democratic principles in it. Now you've got Manchin, you've got Sinema, you've got some moderates there, I think, that made some promises that they won't revisit in reconciliation things that they negotiated on, the things that we see enumerated in the infrastructure package. But I still think we're going to get some really, really big, really bold things. I'm hoping we can get it on that Build Back Better that leaves a legacy that's something like the New Deal. I think it's going to be a little smaller than that, right? But and it's an opportunity to reshape some key components of the country, especially electricity.
Yeah, I mean,
electrification,
the reality,
transportation.
Austin, this is an opportunity to reshape the next 100 years of this country.
It is.
We have the ability to, reshape travel and transit. There's talk of, of extending transit lines so that I can maybe get on a train somewhere and get somewhere else where maybe I don't have to have my car, or maybe if I get an electrical vehicle, maybe I can have a recharging station. Maybe we set up the network that we need. Maybe we transform gas stations into electric charging stations. Maybe we have the ability to do this. To me, this is really exciting stuff because this is all the kind of stuff I was reading about as a kid in sci-fi magazines and books, that we're going to be able to maybe get to those places.
Yeah, no, it's look. I mean, you heard President Biden talk, like, at the State of the Union address, talking about the IBW is going to install these 500,000 stations, right? And he's lived up to that. We've had so many meetings with the automakers, with President Stevenson in the White House, talking about how we do this, not just build it, not just give away money to corporations, but to build this with union workers. And so, I mean, that focus is just so obvious. And so it just sort of underpins everything that we're trying to accomplish here. And the progressives in the House, they want the same thing, right? They want really strong labor provisions in here, not just progressives. I mean, there's a lot of people who do, including one or two Republicans, honestly, in the House, that are strong on labor standards, supported the PRO Act. For instance. So, look, we're going to get as much of the PRO Act as we can. I think in reconciliation, the Byrd rule, which, I think is an antiquated rule that, probably ought to be thrown in the garbage, but it is what it is. If they live by the Byrd rule, it's going to be, we can't get everything in the PRO Act in there, but there are a lot of things that create penalties and provisions and enforcement of laws that are very, very much in bounds there. And that gives us the opportunity to grow union density. As we grow the size of the market, we grow density with it, not just.
There'll be some economic things that get in there, but for a company like Amazon, that doesn't really matter. The last minute here, I want to spend, basically as a recruiting opportunity, because you guys are going to need a lot of people to string up wires, and I say all the time, our apprenticeship programs, all the building trades apprenticeship programs are fantastic. They're pathways to good, solid middle class wage jobs, and more importantly, it's an earn as you learn thing. You're not going to be saddled with a lifetime of student loan debt and all of that. Make the pitch of how this is going to play out for the next generation of workers coming out of schools now.
Yeah, look, I'm a journeyman electrician by trade, right? I went through the apprenticeship and came through the rank and file, so I believe it. I bleed it here. But look, there's no better opportunity. I mean, you see kids going to college, getting degrees, because corporate America is telling them they need a bachelor's degree to rent cars down at the local rental, car rental company. It's absurd, right? They're putting so much of a burden and financial burden on workers to put them to work. This is a way to shift back the economy to the point where employers have to invest in their workers, right? And we've been doing that in the trades for years. I mean, outside the United States military, we're the largest vocational trainer, us and the other trades combined, in the entire world. So huge opportunities. We're talking sophisticated training. We're talking career paths with pensions and healthcare, things you don't find in a lot of other sectors of the economy. These are just excellent jobs with opportunities to move up. The volume of workers we need. We're going to need tons of foremans and project estimators and folks. So the pathway's there. I mean, even if you only want to roll up your sleeves and do the hard, in the ditch work or up on the pole work for a few years, there's going to be so many places to land here. The market's getting bigger, and the opportunities are there. And I'd strongly recommend it anybody. And I would strongly recommend parents coach their kids there, because it's a great way to save their pocketbook too.
I've been trying.
Yeah, look, our doors are open. And we're ready. I mean, we need folks across the board, not just the electrical trade, but across the trades.
Austin, I appreciate the time. Good stuff. I'd love to have you back and talk about some of those opportunities. I know you guys are on the cutting edge of green technology, of the new electric revolution. I'd love to have you come back and share some of the work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Love to take a deep dive on any of that with you anytime.
Good stuff, Austin. Appreciate the time. Austin Keyser, International Assistant to the International President of Government Affairs there at the IBEW. Check out their website, ibew.org. We'll get links out at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day that the chorus girls of the Ziegfeld Follies formed a union. They called their organization the Chorus Equity Association. The Ziegfeld Follies were the hottest ticket on Broadway during the early 1900s. The show was most famous for their chorus girls in elaborate costumes, bedecked with feathers and sparkles. In 1919, performers on Broadway as well as Chicago were standing up for fairer wages and better treatment on the job. The Actors Equity Association's contract had expired, and the actors demanded a fair contract. The producers banded together into the Producing Managers Association. Actors and producers faced off. The actors held a meeting and decided not to go on stage unless the contract was settled. Membership in the union swelled. 12 shows in New York alone were canceled. When Florence Ziegfeld, the head of the Ziegfeld Follies, joined the producers group, the chorus girls took this as a bad sign. They decided it was time they, too, joined the union movement. A former chorus girl named Marie Dressler was elected the first union president. The chorus girls joined the striking actors for a march down Broadway. The Ziegfeld performers formally went out on strike, and the curtain fell on the Follies. Chicago theaters also went dark. In all, 37 productions were shut down in the two cities. Finally, on September 7th, the strike was settled and the Follies returned. In 1955, Chorus Equity merged with the Actors Equity Association.
Here's to the beautiful ladies.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'll tell you, it's one of those things that I've been talking about for, well, probably all 16 years I've been doing this show, that you get those construction jobs, those building trades jobs. Those are solid wage, family-sustaining jobs with excellent benefit, retirement, all kinds of stuff. It's the kind of economy we want to have. It's the kind of economy heavily unionized, make sure people have rights on the job, make sure that they're paid a reasonable wage. They're great jobs. And as you said, look, some of the linemen they're making six figures. That's the kind of economy that you want to build. You don't want to build an economy off of people making $2.83 an hour, or 86, or whatever the Pennsylvania state minimum wage for restaurant workers is. You want to build an economy on high-wage jobs, not exploitable, desperate, low-wage jobs. And sadly, what the pandemic showed us is we've got way too many of those kind of jobs. We gave nice titles, essential, called them heroes, all that stuff, only to underpay them, cheat them, and now we find it's getting even worse. I'm here to share some thoughts on just how bad the inequality has gotten in America. And their ongoing series on Inequality America. I've asked Marcus Baram to come talk with us. Marcus is the special project editor over at Capital in Maine. Marcus, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Rick. I'm in a car, so I hope it's quiet enough for you.
So here I'm looking at this story that you guys just put out. Story of a school teacher who, again, where a lot of people beating up on school teachers because they don't want to go rushing back into an unsafe classroom. And you look at a lot of states across the country, these are really poverty wage jobs and we're paying people poverty wages and entrusting them with our most valuable resource, our kids, the future of this country. It seems insane.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was a school teacher in New York in the early 90s, and I had to work extra jobs just to do anything beyond pay the rent. And I talk to teachers now in New York, where they're a little better paid, but especially in states like Florida, which has one of the lowest salaries for teachers of any state. And they all have to do extra jobs. Like you see in the story, in that example, both teachers, one older and one a younger teacher, both had to work extra jobs just to bring in income. So they're working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep up, and they're doing, like you said, the most important job in the world.
You know, and
Describe it.
as you point out in your piece, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, they found out of all of the OECD countries, the U.S. had the largest. This is your words, the largest salary gap between teachers and other workers with comparable training. And hey, we're number 1.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's kind of stunning. I mean, it's not too surprising when you look at other examples, but a lot of it is that even though teachers are unionized in the U.S., they, in general, the unions don't have that much power, and so they don't have much clout. And you see it overseas where the unions are, much more powerful, especially teachers' unions, and they can, demand and get those salaries they deserve. Where people who graduate from the best schools in Germany and in France and other places go into teaching. They don't go onto Wall Street. I mean, some do. They don't automatically, go into business, or law, but they go into teaching, and it's a respected job.
Yeah. No, and that's
the difference.
And so, I've had a bunch of people over the years say, well, the reason that it's not a respected job is because overwhelmingly it's a job done by women. Is that something you've heard, something you believe, something you think?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a sexist element there. I mean, in terms of like that, generally teachers are considered women, or that's the job you think of as it's female teachers, and I'm sure that's a factor. Another factor is I think for many years it was a job for slightly educated women who served as a central function. It's like, okay, we have these kids you got to teach. It's not the most important. You don't have to be super trained to do it. Even though the challenges have increased exponentially. I remember when I was teaching, you had to deal with, I was teaching up in Harlem, and there were all kinds of issues that you had to deal with, be sort of a social worker at the same time. Things that didn't really happen, when teachers first started to, public schools first started to, open up in the start of the century and in the 19th century, and when it was almost all women, and they were just taking whoever was barely trained or out of high school, or not even high school, somebody who at least could competently lead a group of kids. So the needs, haven't been, they're not being met with salaries that equal those demands.
No, and again, it comes back down to, I would argue, bargaining power. A lot of states have laws that limit what teachers' unions can bargain over, and again, they play between the rules, and that's been a huge, really a huge win for conservatives over the years, is limiting what unions can bargain over and what teachers, especially teachers' union and public sector workers are able to bargain over, to where it's almost to the point where what's the point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look what happened in Wisconsin. I was just reading about that, doing some research today, and you forget how, you remember in 2011, Scott Walker's bill, which completely undercut public sector workers.
Yep.
And most of it was aimed at teachers. I mean, that teachers made up like a large component of those public sector workers, and their salaries went down,
plummeted,
because all of a sudden they had to pay for their own benefits.
No, I was there. I spent 10 days sleeping on the granite floor or the marble floor.
There you go.
In February in Wisconsin, and they rammed it through like thieves in the night, and it was never anything he ran on. But boy, he sure stuck it to those people. And now Wisconsin, which had been at the top end of education, has found themselves somewhere near the middle to the bottom of the pack.
Right. So you had that example, and then you had obviously what happened in Kansas with Sam Brownback, and how teachers there were like starving, and the populace finally revolted, and it also impacted Florida. So under Rick Scott and now under DeSantis, who finally actually pushed for a pay increase, but not a very big pay increase. But under Rick Scott, it was very difficult for teachers, and it really made it difficult for anyone there in that state to make it, even after being a teacher for 10, 20 years. And that was kind of like the point of the story, I think, was that not only to address the crisis of teachers not being paid well and that their wages will remain stagnant, but to look for a place like, Florida, which is considered, not a poor state by any measure, and yet that they pay their teachers so poorly I mean, worse than what you'd think of in Mississippi or Alabama. States that you think of as poverty-stricken.
Yeah, I was looking at the story, and I was going, and I stopped and I reread the story a couple of times because you put the starting number of this guy somewhere. What was it, like it was like $9,000 or $10,000 or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's comparable to that. I don't have it in front of me, but it was something along those lines, and that they have, the increase. It's fairly increased. So he, he's been there teaching for a few years and hasn't really seen much of an increase. And the other woman in the story, Marianne, she has been teaching. She used to teach up in Vermont, where in the 70s she could afford a nice home and a nice life with her family. And now she's in Florida, and she's like, in her 60s, and has to work extra jobs, and is being paid comparably, less than what she was making in Vermont 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a shame.
That is a shame.
More than a shame. It's outrageous.
And here's the thing. There are a lot of workers out there who are going, well, because I just saw it. I apologize. I was looking at the wrong number. In Florida, you've got that they rank 30th in the nation with an average starting salary just over $38,000. You look at the average working person in this country who hasn't seen a raise in 40 years, really. Their standard of living has actually gone backwards. And what's been done masterfully to us is you've seen people pitted against one another. The taxpayers have to pay their salaries, so we're gonna squeeze the quarter till the eagle screams. So that means the teachers don't get raises, education takes a hit. It's this snowballing downward of standard of living for everybody. It's kind of like the Hunger Games, but at the top you still got the Bezoses and the Bloombergs and the billionaire class who've walked away quite handsomely.
Right, and that's one thing that we're reporting actually this week. I'm reporting on this week and next week is, some of the increases that have happened, like in the last 6 months, 7 months, there have been some increases because of the supply and demand and the workforce, and you've seen like low-end workers, cafeteria workers, restaurant chefs, and waiters and busboys and such, and grocery store workers get increases, and sometimes dramatic increases, and yet those have all been kind of wiped out because of inflation. So the cost of living has wiped out a lot of those gains. And even if there wasn't that inflation that, basically makes those wage increases negligible to some extent, even if that wasn't there, it still doesn't really make up for the historical lack of wage increases, where these people who are making, I was just talking to a union rep in L.A., talking about how the workers there, I think retail workers are making they get stuff $24, or the hotel maids and housekeepers get about $24, now $25 an hour, and that was a big increase to fight for that. And that those people, if you look at that sector, their wages have remained so low over the last 20, 30 years, they should be at a much higher level, like either in the 30s or 40s per hour.
Yeah.
And they're not. So these piecemeal increases are kind of lauded by the press, I hate to say it, and by, of course, conservatives then use that to say, well, look, who needs minimum wage increases? Because, the private sector is already giving these people salary increases and the market's, functioning effectively.
Yeah, see, I go the other way with that. I go, we're in a moment right now where, okay, everybody's about $15 an hour. Why not raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour? Because it's probably not going to go back, and the only ones that are going to try and claw it back are the most unscrupulous, low-wage employers that we really shouldn't want to begin with.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. And that's not really a way to be at the whims of the market, which is, of course, going to always look for the lowest wage they can attract somebody. And finally, now they have a situation where people are being able to be selective and say, you know what, that job I was doing stocking shelves, that sucks. I'm gonna look for something better. And that's good. Except you have to worry about inflation, which luckily is going down a little bit, in recent weeks. It's hardly going to make up for the lack of, pay increases over the last 30 years. So there's still a long way to go. You just hope that the increases are more than expected, and there's enough of those over the next 10 years to get to a level where it's somewhat fair.
Yeah, the reality is I think it was the Economic Policy Institute who came out with a study this week that said since 1978, our CEO class has seen their pay rise 1,322%, while the typical worker, people like you and me, just about 18% over that period.
Right.
And you see this great unleveling where, this giant sucking sound, to use a Ross Perot frame, of money out of our pocket to theirs. And there's got to be there's got to be a rubber band that snaps back and goes, enough already. We've got to take some of that back and turn the tide.
I think you see some of that. There is a little bit of, there is a bit of populism, even on the right, where there is a little bit of all of a sudden there's a realization like things are out of whack. And I mean, I think of myself. I mean, like, I think 10, 15 years ago, part of me was kind of like, you know what? It doesn't really matter if people make their billions, whatever. It sounds crazy, but if you want to pay Bezos that much, that's fine. As long as the working people get good wages. And yet, now I've realized just through learning and researching it, that they're interconnected.
Yep.
So, of course, the reason that Bezos is getting so much is because so much is being transferred and sucked away from working people, from wages that they're not getting, from benefits they're not getting, that are all of a sudden being transferred over to the business class into Wall Street.
Absolutely.
And these companies.
And, the reality is, I think I think it was EPI who said it, back in 89, right around the time when I started working, the average CEO pay was 61 to 1. Back in the 60s, it was 20 to 1. We're now at 351 to 1.
Which is stunning.
It's stunning. I mean, the level of greed is stunning. And I'm glad to see that there are a number of strikes going on. I think we need more strikes. I'm a supporter of workers going on strike because it shows that there are some options out there. Because, look, that's obscene. And that's a result of not having a strong, vibrant labor movement to hold these people accountable.
Right. And you start to see, I mean, obviously, even having an election in Alabama for Amazon and that warehouse was a big deal. And even though they lost, now having the NLRB, that hearing officer basically say, go back and do it again, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That was a big moment. That actually could end up, changing the results. That's possible. But even at the very least, I think it gives encouragement to other workers who wouldn't even have considered trying to organize, that now they can do it.
Yeah, I'm still hoping they go, no, we're not going to run another election. We're imposing union recognition on there. You start bargaining.
Oh, right.
That's the right move right there.
But wouldn't it be better, Rick, if they just did another election and they won?
They're not going to win.
Maybe. I don't know.
There isn't. I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm going to say that there's not one person left in that Amazon facility who signed a card.
That's possible. I mean, that's probably a good guess.
Because they've got what did they say during the 150% turnover?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's true.
To me, at some point, you got to go, no, you've gamed the system long enough. You've threatened, you've intimidated, you've created this environment of intimidation. We're going to impose this. You got to start bargaining. Because after all, Alabama's a right to work state. People don't even have to join.
Right.
And for Amazon to spend $200 million to deny them that
can you call Mommy?
Is crazy. Just absolutely crazy. But Marcus, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the work you guys do over there at Capitol in Maine.
Thank you.
Keep it up. I hope you'll come back again soon.
Yes, definitely. I hope you'll make it a regular thing. I love talking to you, Rick.
Outstanding.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks so much, Marcus. But no, I mean, the fact that they spent that kind of money, absolutely insane. It's just crazy. Anyway, going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1881. That was the day the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners passed their first constitution at a meeting in Chicago. The meeting was organized by Peter J. McGuire. McGuire grew up on the Lower East Side of New York City. He became a well-known labor speaker and is credited with helping to found the Labor Day holiday. Representatives from 11 cities answered McGuire's call and came to Chicago. For 4 days, they debated and discussed their vision for a new union. In the end, they completed a constitution and general structure. They nominated McGuire as their first general secretary. At its founding, the new union had just over 2,000 members. It grew slowly, not even reaching 6,000 by 1885. Yet the union leaders remained determined. McGuire logged 18-hour days traveling to different cities, speaking, writing, and promoting the union cause. Then, in 1886, came the nationwide push for the 8-hour workday. On May 1st, carpenters marched in the streets with fellow workers in major cities across the nation. By 1890, union membership had grown to more than 50,000. By the time of the Carpenters' Convention in 1914, held in Indianapolis, the union boasted more than 261,000 members. The union's general secretary addressed the convention that day by looking back on what had been accomplished. He said, "Our organization today is something to be proud of." They never imagined for a moment that they would have an organization such as we have and accomplish as much as we have accomplished. Today, the Brotherhood includes more than 500,000 members. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
A recent headline blared, "Labor shortages end when wages rise." Gosh, Captain Obvious, what an amazing discovery. Someone notify the Nobel Prize Committee, for surely this revolutionary revelation will win this year's prize in economics. Better yet, someone notify that gaggle of Republican governors whose theory of labor economics begins and ends with the medieval demand that workers be whacked with a stick to make them do what the bosses want. At issue is the furious complaint by restaurant chains, nursing homes, big ag, and other low-wage employers that they have a critical labor shortage. It seems that millions of workers today are hesitant to take jobs because there's no affordable child care, or the jobs they're offered expose them and their families to COVID-19, or the work itself is abusive and demeaning, or all of the above. Business chieftains wail that they've been advertising thousands of jobs for waiters, poultry workers, nursing assistants, and such, but they can't get enough takers. So corporate-serving governors have rushed to their rescue, shouting, "Whack 'em with a stick!" These mingy politicians are stripping away jobless benefits, trying to force workers to take any crappy job they're offered. It gives new meaning to the term workforce. But wait, there's an honest way to get the workers they need. Offer fair wages. As the owner of a small chain of restaurants in Atlanta notes, when he stopped lowballing wages, he not only got the workers he needed, but we started to get a better quality of applicants. That translated to better service, happier customers, and more business. This is Jim Hightower saying, if you treat employees as cheap, that's what you'll get. But if you view them as valuable assets, that's what they'll be, and you'll all be better off. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Quick shout out to the BCT GM members out in Aurora, Colorado, who went out on strike today against Nabisco. And again, it's odd how a lot of these snack companies are finally, the workers have had enough of it after having lived through the pandemic. Just on Monday, you had BCT GM members in Portland, Oregon go on strike as well. Same story. I mean, this is an extraordinarily profitable company, especially thanks to the pandemic, wanting to pay poverty wages, but worse, wanted to close places down and move them to Mexico. In fact, they've closed 2 places. The one in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, which is where I looked for all the Oreos. So it looks like I'm never going to have an Oreo again. And also one in Atlanta, Georgia. Good on you guys for going on strike. Hold them accountable. I do like Oreos, so I hope they're going to make them in the U.S. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on maybe a little of this, but more importantly, that thing that went on in Kansas with Frito-Lay and all the stories around that. I've asked Jordan Zakarin to come talk with us. Jordan is a media producer there at More Perfect Union. You can check out their website, perfectunion.us. Jordan, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on again, Rick.
So I'm looking at these, in a time when there haven't been 2 strikes back to back in many places that I've seen, we're now looking at a lot of places going on strike in this moment.
Yeah, it's like they said now, workers, despite not the minimum wage not rising, the Democrats messed up on that. They broke that promise. Workers have more leverage than they have in a very long time, and they are taking advantage of it, both in terms of demanding better wages and getting higher wages. And now, like, the average pay is $15 an hour, which is pretty incredible. But then also people who are at factories, who are at warehouses, people who have been without contracts for many years, finally going out on strike and, asserting themselves. And it's really great to see. And, not every strike is going to win big concessions, but the fact is they're doing it. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And look, the reality is these guys are just trying to save their jobs. One of the things that Mondelez is trying to do is trying to move everything from the U.S. Down to Mexico. They closed that plant in Chicago years ago, which is where I got involved with the check the label on the Oreo bag. Now they've closed Fair Lawn, New Jersey, where they told me this is where we're going to make them, and they closed Atlanta. Now they're talking about these. I may never eat another Oreo again.
Yeah, what you realize is how many companies and how many brands these giant international companies own. We did Mondelez owns so many snacks, crackers, everything. They were with Kraft for a long time. They have that brand. And, we're going to talk about Frito-Lay, and they're owned by PepsiCo, and they own just about every single thing you go to the grocery store for. It's, a small sacrifice, but getting harder and harder to find a food that is not made by a multinational conglomerate that abuses its workers.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Frito-Lay strike. I got to be honest. I know I've been on strike myself. I know how difficult it is. I know the struggles that come along with it. It was a 3-week long strike, as I remember, which is, you start getting into that, things start to hurt. But I gotta tell you, I don't think they got enough. The fact that you went down from working potentially 84 hours down to 72, I don't know that that's a great victory. A little bit. Tell me I'm wrong.
I think approving the contract was definitely contentious. Within the union, they spent a while debating it, and I think it was a matter of people starting to cross the picket line. People were starting to go back to work, which is always tough. It makes it hard. And a lot of the people were older folks who who had a few years for retirement. They wanted to just get through it. And I think that they had not struck there for like 20 plus years. And I think that this was unfortunately a time where they had the union. They don't have a great deal compared to a lot of the other unions. Teamsters in Ohio has a better deal than them. So they were working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. A lot of times people said they worked 5 straight months without a day off. Just brutal conditions. And, seeing photos from inside and talking to people who are inside, just the safety conditions are just appalling. No, they did not get nearly enough. I think that, it goes to show that Kansas is a really tough place to strike. It's very much a right to work state. I hate that term, but right to work. And it's become, it was tough for them. And I think that the union I don't think they were prepared for the amount of attention that was going to come for the strike and the amount of support they would have gotten nationally. The stuff they got, the contract they got was the same thing that was offered by Frito-Lay at the outset of the strike. And so they would have had to wait a lot longer. Speaking with some people there, they got a 2-year contract, and I think there was a lot of people who were upset about it. I think a lot of people weren't able to vote because of the hours that they were allowed to vote. And in 2 years from now, it may come that there's a bunch of younger workers there that are more willing to stand the line.
Yeah. Now, one of the guys, you guys exposed a story there that's gotten an awful lot of attention. This worker, Brandon Ingram, his name was. He was a Frito-Lay worker, somebody who was just doing his job. went over to push a dock plate button and ended up getting almost electrocuted. They take him they take him to the hospital, probably the wrong hospital, almost an hour away, which companies do, and then it's this horror story of just big bad company trying to crush this guy who wants nothing more than to be able to say, hey, I need to support my family.
Yeah, this guy Brandon, I got to know his family pretty well, and he was a young Navy vet. He was, working at Frito-Lay for years, and he had worked there, I think, for like 6 years at that point. His cousin worked there, his friends worked there, all toiling under. This is in St. Louis, toiling under pretty rough conditions, but they made the best of it, and he was moving up at the company. And like you said, he hits a button, gets just electric shock throughout his body. And, this had been, another guy told me recently, this button had been broken time and time again. This had been a problem. They had loose wires there all the time. They used to just stamp them down with their feet. This was a known hazard. And he hits the button, gets the electric volts all throughout his body. It take him 45 minutes to a company doctor, not the doctors, he says they passed 4 hospitals on the way there. And, they said, oh, you're fine, not a big deal. His body just starts shutting down, right? Like he's got just pains everywhere, and they battle him on what short-term disability he can have. Finally, he's able to get out, do that, but they will not pay for any of his medical bills. He ends up with electric shock. It's not like he broke his leg and smashed in a bunch of places. This thing had long-term consequences, changed the way his body worked. He starts having bulging discs in his back or in his neck. That was a big deal. His esophagus had problems in his neck there and his jaw. He's got liver disease, which can happen with an electrocution, so it wasn't, this all happened because he was hurt there, but they were able to raise these doubts that, it wasn't like a crane fell on him and broke his leg in half. And so they battle him. Sedgwick, the insurance company, which is infamous for doing this, they don't want to give anybody any money or any comp, follow him and his family. His wife, who's great in the video, if you guys see it, Melissa, she was a star of the show. She was in tears. They homeschool their kids now because they are being so constantly followed. We had lots of video, and we only put a little bit of it in the video we did, but of them just following them everywhere he went to try and say, oh, hey, look, you're walking with a cane, but why are you carrying this bag of groceries, And it's just been this ongoing battle for him, and they will not settle. They will not give him, they're trying to give him workers' comp for just a few years, but this guy's back, his body has just been decimated, and they don't want to give him a fair settlement.
No, and the sad thing is as horrible as this story is, and it is horrible, this is the reality for hundreds of thousands, if not a million workers in this country every year. The fact that these big companies have such power, such control, and in a lot of states, especially Republican-leaning, Republican-governed states, they've gone after and destroyed workers' compensation law. I know where I'm at in Pennsylvania. Every chance they get, they try and make it worse. And they've done a good job of making workers' comp worse in this state. I can't imagine what they've gotten away with in a state like Kansas.
Yeah, it's they have to have they're Missouri independent medical boards, right? And medical exams, and that's a doctor generally paid by the insurance company or the employer. They've got, if you happen to have a medical exam board, they happen to have oftentimes a lot of nomination, a lot of people, a lot of members who also work for companies separately. So it's a very, very slanted system. It's a very terrible system. A lot of companies now just don't pay into workers' comp, generally speaking, and they don't have that kind of insurance anymore. And so that's happening in states like Oklahoma and Texas. And yeah, it's a disaster of a system. It's something we've been focusing on. It's the fact that companies like Sedgwick, the insurance company, can just follow these people. They're allowed to film them because they're allowed to say, they want evidence that they could be committing fraud. It's the same thing with voter fraud, right? Trying to convict people of who are just trying to live their lives, trying to make it through the day, trying to convict them of fraud when it's really the big companies are doing things like that. So it's a real disaster of a system. And like you said, it's so unfortunate that happens so often. We got an influx of emails from folks that went through the same thing, whether they work for a postal service, FedEx, other places, people coming up to them and saying, why are you doing this? Why are you carrying that? Why are you walking this way? And then running away, when they have a camera or something like that.
Or worse yet, they set them up by giving them free stuff. We've seen, I've heard stories of sting operations where, hey, you won this. All you have to do is pick this up off the ground and walk away with it. All kinds of stupid stuff that they get away with.
Yeah, it's really terrible, and there's so often so little based on the way the system is and just the way it's tough to get a you're going to go up against a bunch of corporate lawyers, insurance lawyers, and you have one workers' comp lawyer who's doing his best or doing their best. It's often a David versus Goliath situation.
Yeah, I know. Now, how are they doing now? I mean, this guy's got lifelong disabilities. When I watch the video, I'm going, this is horribly tragic for any working person. But like I said, I actually know people who have gone through some of this stuff, and the money doesn't make it better. A couple of bucks isn't going to change this guy's life. He was injured on the job through their fault. And they're skating away from it. And I gotta wonder, did they ever fix the button?
That I don't know, because he didn't last long at the job long after that. They tried to make him come back and just couldn't get through it. I've kept in touch with the family since we came out with the video. I think they were pretty overwhelmed. No one was listening to them, and that's the thing. These stories are a dime a dozen, but no one listens to them. And so I think by putting it out there, hopefully, more of this stuff comes to attention. The outrage that we saw at Frito-Lay for just this one little incident, not little incident, but this one singular incident, it got a lot of national attention. I think they were a little overwhelmed, but they started to go fund me, that we put the link out to. It didn't do much other than that, but we put out the link out to it. Over $140,000 people donated to them. Like thousands of people chipped in. And again, like you said, does not fix what happened. They've been living with this hell in the last 4 years. He's permanently busted up his body. He won't be able to do the same thing. I mean, this is a guy who's fit. He was a Navy vet. He was in his 30s. This is not going to bring everything back. His wife is now the sole breadwinner, and they raised all this money for her to start her own business or grow her small business that she's been trying to grow. And, hopefully they can find some peace. I don't know, at Frito-Lay they put out a statement, Frito-Lay, kind of a vague, sort of evasive statement trying to get rid of the blame for themselves. But hopefully a judge sees this. Hopefully it helps them in that way. But, at least I think, being heard and getting some justice and having some that way and having people chip in and try and help them get back on their feet. Again, it's small compared to what's going to happen, for the rest of his life and the kind of disabilities he's going to deal with. But hopefully, there's a happy ending.
Yeah. And what's amazing to me is, these big, powerful corporations, the rich and powerful, they always get to tell their side of things. They always get to tell their story. The rest of us, we struggle to be heard. And if it's not for organizations like More Perfect Union, if it's not for the work that you guys are doing, if it's not for, programs like this, those stories never get told.
What's amazing to me is that's so true. And there's such brand loyalty, which is, kind of a poisonous word. But for the most part, people were really responsive and in a good way to this video. But, there's still people that are saying, oh, he could be lying, or how do we know it's true? Or, why would the company do that to him? And there's been a mass brainwashing, this, setting people against each other on behalf of these giant corporations. So,
yeah. And the thing is, it's one of those things where, we want to believe the system's fair. We want to believe that in the event something happens, we'll be protected. And if we look at a story like this, it's got to be an outlier because the system that we believe in has to work. And I go, look, it doesn't. It's broken from top to bottom because, much like you pointed out, you've got a Republican state, a Republican governor. They've moved through and they've destroyed workers' comp, and they put their appointees on that board. It is a seriously tilted thing because, look, Republicans are against, and I hate making this as political and as simple and as cut and dry as it is, but it's been the Republicans who have been doing everything they can do to destroy the social safety net in this country, and workers' comp is part of that social safety net.
I mean, it's a huge part of it. It's not just that you get a reward for being hurt, like the rest of your life, for a guy like Brandon. Now, some people, they break their leg and they get some money to break up for the time they weren't at work. But a guy like Brandon, his life has changed. And, like you said, people want to believe the system is fair. They want to believe when they eat Oreos, they're not doing anything wrong because, they probably work for a big corporation that gives them a hell of a time. And everyone's pretty beaten down. But, it's hopefully bringing these stories to light. It's justice for one family, hopefully, giving them some compensation and, some, having people listen to them. But hopefully it leads to more and more people coming forward, more and more people believing it's the case and, demanding big companies take action.
Yeah. And look, I'm hoping these stories, by telling these stories and talking about these strikes and these conditions that these workers are struggling under. Because look, Nabisco, Frito-Lay, PepsiCo, these are Mondelez, these are big companies, wildly profitable. CEOs, lining their pockets, nickel and diming these people literally in some cases to death.
Yeah, Mondelez made $3.5 billion last year. $3.55 billion last year. They are trying to change the overtime scheme for the workers at the American factories. They want to make it so that they don't get overtime after 8 hours in a day. They have to hit a certain amount of time per week. So they're trying to make people work longer shifts and then, let them off without giving them overtime. They're trying to get rid of their regular weekends off.
And the thing that's amazing to me, if we learned our history in this country, we literally had people who died to get the 8-hour workday. And I grew up at a time where, the 8-hour day was almost sacrosanct. And there was no question that you got overtime after 8 hours. And now you got these big companies who are, it's now everybody's after 40 hours unless you have a union. Or now they've been trying for years to change it to where, well, let's go to 160 hours a month. So you can work 160 hours in 1 week and you can get the rest of the month off. It's crazy what we've allowed them to get away with.
Yeah, and there's until now there hasn't been much leverage workers have, and hopefully that, I know the job market's going to be tightening up a little bit, but hopefully over the next bunch of months, and hopefully with the PRO Act, get some of the elements of that in the reconciliation bill. Hopefully that does a bit of help as well.
Yeah, the website perfectunion.us, tons of stories there, good video stuff. You guys do really fantastic work, high quality stuff. I love it. I hope you'll come back and share some more of this with us, and keep us up to date on what's going on with this guy, and if there's any way we can help.
Absolutely, will do. Thanks so much, Rick.
Jordan, I appreciate the time. Again, make sure you check out the website, perfectunion.us. We'll get links out on social media on how you can do that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a situation where you got hurt on the job? Did it go like this? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1955. That was the day Teamsters organizer, 28-year-old William Grammy, was kidnapped and beaten. Grammy had arrived in Sebastopol, California to help organize about 350 workers in local canneries, drying plants, and fruit sheds. The Teamsters had been on campaign footing for months in an attempt to win union recognition, higher wages, better working conditions, and benefits. They had lost a union representation election the previous fall after Sebastopol apple growers moved quickly to lay off union supporters. By January, cannery workers at Oscar Hall & Sons voted for union representation. The workers at Barlow Company would vote against the union just 2 months later. But by early August, the strike wave hit. Workers walked off the job at the Sebastopol Cooperative Cannery. More at 7 other area canneries joined them on strike in the days that followed. Grammy would later testify that he had heard reports weeks earlier of a grower threatening to have him killed within 3 hours should any strike actually take place. During the strike that would ultimately prove victorious, 3 men kidnapped Grammy outside the union's hall. He was driven along a rural road, tied to a pole, gagged, and beaten with a bicycle chain. Left for dead, he was found the next day and hospitalized immediately. But the union and the strikers remained undeterred. Before the strike was over, scab trucks attempting to haul apples to market were vandalized and burned, and scab drivers were beaten. 8 months later, the apple industry finally came to the negotiating table. By May of 1956, apple growers signed with the Teamsters. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, according to the commissioner of the Chicago Department of Public Health, the Lollapalooza event they had was not a super spreader event. They're claiming that the 4-day festival that began on July 29th has not shown to be a super spreader event. In fact, I think they said there have only been 203 cases that have been identified in the 2 weeks since the festival began. And evidently that includes numbers of people who were diagnosed with COVID on or after attending the festival. And my mind goes to this spot of this is going to be an interesting moment, because I'm waiting to see what happens to the people who right now are attending Bike Week in Sturgis. In a couple weeks when that's over, what will we see come out of that? Will we see a massive spreader event where people are taking it all over the country like we saw last year? And then will that mean that vaccines worked? That, I'm going to assume that more people in Chicago who are attending Lollapalooza were vaccinated than what we're going to see at Bike Week. Just kind of throwing that out there as a thought. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, though, because these huge events, the potential is there. Now, we're taking tomorrow off the show because I've promised my kids I'm going to take them to see Green Day in concert. We bought these tickets 2 years ago. They've been waiting for this day. I'm a little leery. I'm a little concerned. We're going to wear the masks. We're going to try and do what we can, but ultimately, we're vaccinated. And going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, for me, some interesting news on the investment front. Evidently, Ron DeSantis has rolled out a new treatment plan, I guess, for the state to fight COVID-19. Today, he announced that they're going to start dispensing this Regeneron, the microclonal antibody, whatever this is. They're going to do it through mobile clinics. We're going to get people this Regeneron that's evidently going to help, I guess, if you have it. Not sure. But I got to question whether he bought stock in that company yet. Because, it just seems odd that now they're going to jump out with this. Now you may remember, that's the treatment that Regeneron is what Trump got when he got COVID. Now the claim is that this is supposed to wipe it out. I gotta wonder, and it'll be interesting to see how this works. I also remember it being really freaking expensive, so I wonder who's paying for that when you could have just gotten the vaccine. But like I said, I'm going to want to know if he bought stock in that company. And I guess the other part of it is how it's going to work. Also, Rand Paul. Turns out Rand Paul's wife bought Gilead Science stock some 16 months ago. And now we're just finding out about it. And I had a conversation with a friend today, and he's going, this insider trading stuff, this is crazy. They get away with this, and nobody ever's held accountable. Like the woman from Georgia, like a number of other senators, Republican senators who got caught. No real penalties there, were there? No, there weren't. But Rand Paul's wife, I'm going to give Rand Paul a pass on this. I'm going to. One, I understand, paperwork's hard to do. Hard to do, especially when you got the the Aqua Buddha. But more importantly, the line in this, that two lines caught my attention. One was, it took 16 months for him to find out from his wife, which I give him a pass, because if you were Rand Paul's wife, would you talk to him? No, so not surprising. The other one that caught my attention was almost to the end of the article. His spokesperson, according to the article, said the senator attended no briefings on COVID-19. So the argument here that she's making is that he can't have any inside information to have used to buy these stocks, because he didn't have any inside information because he didn't show up to any of the briefings. He didn't know anything about it, which then makes me go, well, wait a second. If he didn't show up and he didn't know what was going on and he didn't get the briefings, well, why is he running his mouth again? And don't we pay him? I know, he sent a staffer to do it. It's kind of, I guess the people of Kentucky, I guess you got to think about this. And we're in this moment. We're in this interesting moment where, and I always like to think about when we're going through something, I always like to think 100 years out and wonder what people are going to think of the decisions that were made. You know, what's history? What history are we making? When my great-grandchildren look back and go, boy, they were stupid. How could they be so misled? Because we do this, don't we? We look back at history and go, how could they possibly have done that? How could you have been so naive or how stupid? We're living the moment. The question is, do you want to live a positive moment? Do you want the kids to look back and go, boy, they were smart? Or do you want them to go, wow, they were really moronic? Those apples fell way away from the tree. In fact, so far away that they made applesauce out of them. Crazy. It seems to be the only word that I can keep coming up with for why we're in this position. And I just go back to, had we just done right at the beginning what we were supposed to do? And we're in another one of those moments. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
It is a massive investment, $3.5 trillion to be spent on American families and to combat the climate crisis.
Democrats pass budget reconciliation blueprint, setting the stage for historic climate action. Wildfire smoke reaches North Pole for the first time ever. Plus, Tropical Depression Fred heads to Florida as the rest of the globe swelters.
All of that sweltering and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
If Joe Biden really wants $66 billion for trains, he should change Amtrak's name to Track Force.
True that. This is your Green News Report.
Now sign the check, Mitch. Freedom isn't free.
Okay, Desi Doyen, potentially very big news in the U.S. Congress, but of course, extreme weather gets in the way already.
Oh, always it does. First, as we go to air, Tropical Depression Fred is tracking toward Florida, while much of the U.S. is roasting under another extreme heat wave, prompting excessive heat warnings or advisories covering more than 150 million people. In Oregon, Governor Kate Brown has declared a heat emergency just weeks after a deadly heat wave struck the Pacific Northwest. In Europe, still in the grip of a persistent, widespread heat wave fueling record wildfires, the island of Sicily this week, if confirmed, may have set a new all-time highest temperature record for the entire continent of at least 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
In Sicily.
Tunisia on Wednesday also set a new all-time national record of 122 degrees Fahrenheit.
In Tunisia.
In Siberia, also in the grip of an intense heat wave, massive wildfires in that one single region are now bigger than all of the world's other fires combined.
Well done, Siberia.
Worse, smoke from those fires has reached the North Pole for the first time in recorded history, according to satellite observations. Black soot from the wildfires sadly settles on Arctic ice, absorbing the sun's heat, which accelerates the melting of the ice.
Santa is not going to like that at all.
Now, a new dire UN climate report issued this week warns warns that global warming and extreme weather disasters will worsen and intensify over the next 20 to 30 years, and that the window is closing for world governments to enact swift changes to have a decent chance of staving off truly catastrophic impacts projected for the latter half of this century. To that end,
after years and years of infrastructure week, we're on the cusp of an infrastructure decade.
After months of negotiations, Senate Democrats this week passed two major bills. First was the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure deal, which focuses on repairing the nation's crumbling infrastructure, with 19 Republicans voting in favor. If it's passed by the House, this modest bill would be the biggest investment in traditional infrastructure since the interstate highway system decades ago.
And in electric vehicle charging stations, just want to point that out.
Oh, indeed. President Biden emphasized its historic nature.
This bill's going to help make a historic recovery a long-term boom.
Senate Democrats also this week pushed through a key procedural vote on a budget resolution strictly along party lines that lays the groundwork for the Democrats' only $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation package, funding over 10 years that boosts working families and so-called human infrastructure. The blueprint also contains the bulk of Biden's climate agenda, targeting 100% clean electricity by 2035 and net zero carbon emissions economy-wide by 2050.
Cool.
It has significant investments to speed the transition away from fossil fuels, cut pollution and emissions, and funds repairs and upgrades to adapt the nation's infrastructure for climate resilience. In its present form, it establishes a clean electricity standard, a civilian climate corps jobs program, investments in environmental justice, electrifying buildings, expanding electric vehicles, renewable energy, and more. Final passage in the laborious legislative process would likely come in mid-September, with 0 Republican votes expected.
But it does appear to be coming as long as, well, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema decide to play along.
The two bills together would be the biggest infrastructure investment in U.S. history and are widely seen as the last chance for the U.S. to take meaningful climate action for the next decade if Republicans retake Congress in the 2022 midterm elections. In a recent interview on the broadcast, climate scientist Dr. Michael Mann referred to the dire new UN climate report released this week in noting just how crucial it is that the U.S. take action.
Potential for climate policy stands on a knife edge. This is the defining challenge of our time. Catastrophic climate change is here. The science tells us that we have to act now. This is a defining moment in human civilization.
And I don't think that's an overstatement. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Seems like South Dakota is the ground zero of crazy right now. You've got the bike week at Sturgis, and also you have the big symposium with the My Pillow guy in Sioux Falls. Evidently, the My Pillow guy claims that while he was at the symposium, he was attacked. Somebody beat him up. And, you know, I got to think, this is where my mind goes, and maybe I'm wrong, but my mind got to this place where he got beat up by one of the people who was attending the sham of a, sham fest. Now, we're gonna tell you who the cheating was, and we're going to show you how the cheating was. And then he finally realized that he's been wasting his life following the pillow guy, and Trump actually lost. So basically, he found his marbles, and then lost them again and beat him senseless. All over the fact that there was nothing out of that symposium. Nothing. There was nothing. There were some fun moments, but nothing on the election. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So did you catch any of the big symposium by the pillow guy?
No, I mean, I try to get a good night's sleep.
Do you have a My Pillow?
Without my pillow. No, I don't have my pillow. I'm afraid they put a chip in it. How's that?
Oh.
I want to start something.
Maybe that's it. Maybe
never know.
that's how they've got all these people.
That's it.
They put
I
something
think
in the
so.
pillow.
Probably somebody hit him that got mad at the poor quality of the pillow. I don't know. But that whole thing, they came out and they were canceling originally. He was hacked and then he's going to let the world know about the evil, but nobody was hospitalized. I don't even know what happened, exactly who hit whom, but I know he's being sued for $1.3 billion by Dominion Voting System. I know that.
Yeah, I know that, and I hope they get all $1.3 billion out of him.
Well, I've got to give Dominion credit. I mean, they just didn't sit back and say, well, we'll just say, oh, they're all wrong. They went after them. I mean, they went after everybody, and I've got to give them credit for that.
No, I've been watching this, and I'm hoping more. I hope we get to see. I hope they uncover the whole thing. There was a story I think it was day before yesterday, that they let out that OAN, that One America News, that one of their mathematician experts was actually just a guy who put swing sets together. I mean, they're literally just taking people to make stuff up with the most bizarre statements, giving them false credentials, and then putting them on the air as though they're experts to say the wildest stuff just to meet the ends of where they're trying to go with their made up stories.
Right, and they're going to do this in different parts. I mean, it was South Dakota, but they're going to, have them in different parts. I think of the country.
Yeah, I hope he comes to this neck of the woods. I would I would love to go to one of these just to ask the people, what's wrong with you?
It's more like a political rally is what it boils down to, because there's no real facts obviously that are brought out.
Right.
And then I don't know how he became the whole centerpiece. One thing I will
he's got
defend
money.
him, but one thing I will defend him on. Anybody that's mad at him, honestly, and I'm totally serious about this, refrain from saying, he's a drug addict. At one point in time, and he was in recovery for drugs, so they can call him crazy. But just, as far as the addiction, that's not what is driving him to do this today. The previous addiction.
Well, let me ask you about that, because I've thought about this, and I know a number of people who are in recovery. Who've gone through the process, and
sure,
it seems to me that they have addictive personalities, like a lot of people.
Alpha.
Yep, and that addiction then manifests itself in another way. So I look at someone like Lindell, and I go, okay, he's no longer doing the drug, but he's addicted to something else, and it's this craziness that he's addicted to.
Now, I think that's fair game. I've had, friends of mine have said, well, he's a drug addict. He's in recovery. So I don't think that's, fair game.
No.
But I think what is fair game is, an alpha personality, and he went into something else. I'm in recovery. I sponsor people in recovery. And, part of the issue, too, is when you get into recovery and you get clean, et cetera, you have to do what we say is staying in the middle of the boat. Okay? That's the phrase, stay in the middle of the boat. And sometimes people don't, and so his alpha personality, previous, personality of addiction, translates it into having to do something else to be in control, to be in the forefront. So I think you make a great point, a fair point. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I've known people throughout the years who,
right.
and I hate to frame it this way, but when they were drinking and when they were doing drugs, they were decent people. They got clean and they just became the most insufferable folks. It's like a former smoker. You could never be around a former smoker.
Well, and that's why you have to have behavioral change. It's beyond stopping.
Right.
You have to have behavioral change, and if you don't, then sometimes you do another outlet, and his outlet is doing symposiums.
Well,
on whatever, not the pillows, but the fraud.
There you go. He's
Sure.
gonna. I think at some point he's gonna wake up and regret this whole thing, because he's gonna. I think at some point I hope he can realize at some point that, boy, he threw his fortune away for what was a lie.
Right.
Sad. Interesting. Your neck of the woods. Congressman Warren Davidson. I don't know if you saw his tweet today.
No.
Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson tweeted out, overreaching governments and corporations won't stop trying to impose critical health theory on Americans. That's why we need my vaccine passport prevention act now more than ever. I am predicting that critical health theory will be the new buzzword that they begin to raise money off of, because, hey, you've got those migrants coming across the border, and those black people, they're the ones who are spreading the virus, not the Sturgis, not the unmasked.
No, I didn't know that. It's interesting, though. Critical. They're using the title for the teaching of racial issues, and they're tying that because of the right's opposition to that. That's very interesting what he's doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I saw that immediately. I'm going, it's that
Right.
dog whistle.
Right. No, I did not see that.
Yeah, and I'm waiting for them to start sending out fundraising letters on critical health theory. The Democrats and those liberals, they want you to be healthy.
Well, what does he say about the critical health? I mean, I'm trying to follow what he says.
Well, he hasn't said anything. He's pimping his vaccine passport prevention act, which would ban any vaccine passports. Which I guess we're just never going to travel overseas, I guess. Is that how that works?
Right. I mean, you have, again, if anybody traveled way back when in the 80s, for example, you had your yellow little booklet, I think it was 3 pages or whatever, and in there you had, depending on the country you're going to, you would have your malaria or, whatever would depend on where you're going to. And so we've had those before.
Yeah.
And there's going to be vaccine passports. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to have a vaccine passport to walk into a store, but I think for flights, it's going to become a regular, part of our life. I really do.
Yeah. Because, look, I remember a couple of years ago, well, a number of years ago, it's got to be going back 10, 12, maybe even further. Our friend Ellen Ratner, she was doing trips to Sudan, and I had signed up. I said, I'd be willing to go. And when she gave me the list of things that I had to do to get through it, I'm like, yeah, never mind.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like I said, we've had it for years. Now, in his bill, if that bill would pass, it would allow his bill would allow. It's not going to pass, of course. Individuals to sue private companies if anyone attempts to require proof of vaccination. They could sue. Now, part of the problem, he would have obviously is that way back when the vaccines first came out, I think it was the National Labor Relations Board segment of it had that dealt with discrimination had said it was not discriminatory if the employers had a requirement. So that standard was set a long time back.
Right.
With the shots, with the private sector. So his bill would have actually protected private, would allow citizens to sue, not to protect private companies if they required it.
Just crazy to me. Just crazy. Also, did you see that Trump has called the police officer who shot Ashley Babbitt? He's called him a murderer. And this seems threatening to me. This is one of those things where, I'm concerned. He says we know who he is.
It's just I can't follow at all why people are jumping aboard. And President Trump, former president himself, because he's now taking his rhetoric, against this police officer and calling him a murderer, and we know who he is. And that's almost a lynch mob mentality. We know who he is. And he had asked, at one time, he said, well, he was part of a Democratic security detail. I hate to tell anybody, because I oversaw Capitol Hill Police, we don't have Democratic or Republican security details, period. They could at one point in time worked for the speaker, they could go work for the minority leader. I can't recall a case in the 11 years I was there, and I chaired House Administration to oversee the police. I cannot remember one case where anybody came to my office and said that information was passed by a police officer who happened to be then working for somebody of the opposite party because they were assigned to them. So we don't have individual, as Trump tried to say before. See, he tried to say before Democratic police officer, basically, assigned to the Democrats, when it was somebody assigned to the floor of security. That didn't work. So now he's come out and he's, saying the murderer. I honestly, even for Trump, I can't believe he said that. It's shocking. Shocking.
I understand. Today, 4 years ago today, was the day Heather Heyer was murdered in Charlottesville, Virginia. A guy from Ohio, 20-year-old Nazi from Ohio, ran her over along with 35 other people. Both, good people on both sides there. But the guy who was stopping the treasonous woman from breaking in, he's a murderer. And what's interesting to me is, from what I've heard from my sources, is that the police officer is a black guy. And I fear that this is part of this, you use lynch mob, this kind of ramping up the rhetoric to the point to where it now becomes a black-white thing, instead of this woman was breaking the law. This woman was feet away from doing their, breaking into their mission of stopping that election from being certified.
Well, here's the point too for this. If former President Trump understood the Capitol, this would be comparable to somehow people getting through the gates of the White House. They are not through security. They enter the White House. No one knows if they have a weapon or not. And let me ask this question: what do you think would have happened if that scenario had happened when Trump was president and people came through the fence? They don't know if they had weapons or not, and they got into the door of the White House. What does anybody think would have happened?
Well, Trump would have invited him in for tea. They'd have given him some KFC.
No, I'm talking about people against him.
No, they just shot him dead on the spot.
They would have shot all of them with automatic weapons instantly. And the woman who got killed was breaching the door, and when you go through that door, you immediately turn right, and there's a door, and you're on the floor of the House. And if they had weapons, they could shoot anybody there on the floor. So they're lucky, actually, to be honest with you, that they were walking and running through the Capitol without being shot. Lucky.
Yeah.
But if you get towards the floor of the House, you are putting yourself in a situation where you justifiably can be shot, period. And that's why the Justice Department looked this over and said the officer did nothing wrong. Once that happened, to now say, well, who is he and what's his name, and he's a murderer, is absolutely just despicable.
But here's the thing, and this is what's frustrating to me is, we had talked about this a while ago, and I said, look, I'm surprised that nobody's leaked his name already. So clearly Trump knows, and I actually know some people who claim to know who it is as well. That's one of those really kind of scary things, that eventually someone could find out who this person is and do horrible things to him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, correct. In July, back in July, to a call-in that Trump did, he called Babbitt. I think she was a wonderful young woman.
Yeah.
She went to a peaceful protest, despite the fact they were in there with zip ties and they wanted to hang the vice president and shoot the speaker. And despite the fact that the riot was, peaceful, and that the person who shot her in the head was security for a high official, a Democrat. So they took that tone back in July. And again, like I said, it didn't work. So now it's because everybody knows they're not assigned permanently to Democrat or Republican. And then he takes the tact of the murderer. And it's unbelievable. It's dangerous.
Yeah, but you say unbelievable, but we lived through 4 years of this. I mean, when Heather Heyer was killed, it was good people on both sides, so nothing anymore surprises me.
Well, that's true. That's true. I just don't know how, if he was in again, I'll put it in other terms, if he was in the White House as President of the United States and people were coming in there and they had, injured White House security people, Secret Service, and they had injured him and they breached the front door of the White House, they would have been shot with automatic weapons one after the other.
So why weren't they?
And we all know that.
Why weren't they? Why were the Capitol Police so restrained in this?
I'm not out there anymore, but if I was out there and still chaired House administration, I directly oversaw the police, I would ask the same question. When the shooter came through the south side entrance to the building that day, and he shot Officer Gibson eventually down through the corridor, was there any question about people shooting him? No, they shot him.
No.
They tried to shoot him right away because they're breaching the Capitol, and again, do they have weapons? Of course, some of those people had weapons. I'm shocked that when they just started up the steps that a few weren't gunned down. I'm surprised at that.
And why do you think that is? I mean,
I don't know. It's funny you asked me that question because I have asked myself that, tons of times of why, force wasn't used because you just can't breach the Capitol with the members of Congress and the staff, the Vice President of the United States in there like that. You can't do it. And I don't know of any other situation where they wouldn't have, taken full force.
Yeah, because
somebody made a call.
My original thought, and I said this, the day of, is the reason that there wasn't more shooting by the Capitol Police is because they feared they were outgunned. They were definitely outnumbered, and they feared that they were outgunned.
Because that would have, in the end, by the way, and I know people say, well, that's just not right, but it would have been justifiable shootings if they had done that.
Yeah.
It would. I guarantee you, it would have been deemed justifiable.
And the interesting thing is, and this is where now it's spinning around in my head, this would have been a very high deterrent because the people who are generally the gun folks are the ones who, well, if you go in there and use overwhelming force, they'll never do it again. Had you wiped half of them out, no one would ever do that again.
Right. Well, exactly. Well, it would stop them advancing too. And that's not shooting into an unarmed crowd or something. If they're actually heading to the door, trying to break through the windows, it would have been a justifiable shooting.
Yeah.
They let them go. Then when they got to the floor, they had to do something. We have Capitol Hill police are stationed out there with automatic weapons. And I can remember two members of Congress coming to me at the time, one Democrat and one Republican, saying, they can't have automatic weapons. We don't like the view of it. It doesn't look good. And I said, well, if somebody runs up here with an automatic weapon, what do you want them to do? Have a revolver to counter them? This is the era and the times we live in. And we have those officers stationed for a reason with automatic weapons, and it's if in case somebody tries to breach the Capitol.
Yeah.
Because they will. Anybody's been in the Capitol knows the Capitol well. There's not necessarily a whole lot of places you can just immediately go to. It's like a labyrinth, but people can go downstairs and follow them in the tunnels. It's really not a place where you can just go hide somewhere automatically.
Yeah. No, it's just an interesting day for me. The juxtaposition of Heather Heyer, who was run down by the Nazi from Ohio, and Trump saying that this was that she was murdered, that this Ashley Babbitt was murdered, and trying to make a martyr out of her.
That was a terrible statement. Absolutely terrible.
Terrible. Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. Seriously, I mean, that's where my mind goes, in this place where, look, she shouldn't have been in there. And I fear for this officer who did his job, because Trump's toying with him and with the base and getting them riled up. It's crazy. Sad stuff. Evidently some breaking news today. Evidently a Republican strategist and campaign manager, this Anton Lazaro, evidently was indicted today on 5 counts of sex trafficking and 3 counts of obstruction of justice. Here we have, for our QAnon listeners, we have found the pedophiles. They are firmly in the Republican Party. Here is one of them, evidently. But there's a bunch of them. You go back to Mark Foley, the congressman who was, had the underage boys. You go to Denny Hastert, who, I guess just got out of prison not too long ago for fiddling around with underage boys. Jim Jordan, who was accused of looking the other way when those Ohio State wrestlers and athletes were being assaulted. I mean, the list goes on. Roy Moore, it's crazy. The guy who's running against Liz Cheney, knocked up a 14-year-old. And of course Joel Greenberg and his pleading guilty, which I keep coming back to. When does Matt Gaetz get arrested? I gotta throw that in there. He's still there. But now here you got this guy, this Lazaro. Seems to be a pattern here. And for all the Q folks, maybe you might want to go down that rabbit hole. Just kind of a thought. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com.